Thank you, Gregory. Well, Gregory is very nice. It'd only take about 20 minutes to get everything out of my brain, I'm sure. As far as being the CEO of the organization, yeah, that's a non-paid group. Everybody else is doing the work. We're just watching and helping people in terms of the foster home care community because it's a passion of mine, just like nutrition is a passion of mine. And if you really love something, then you do it. And if something good comes from that, then that's a serendipity. But you still have to be true to what you believe in. And I believe in IMPaX. Since, like Greg said, 1994. And this is the only company, truthfully, this is the only network marketing company I would do anything with. Other than IMPaX, it wouldn't happen because just the integrity of the people, the products, and the way things are done makes it a special place, and obviously I wouldn't have stayed if that hadn't been the case. Tonight I want to talk about, well, many things, but especially truthfully, I mean, I use Enterprime every day. But my most special product has been the MPX100. It's something I believed in for a long time. The implications of why it's important really get to the heart of the health crisis that we're experiencing in the United States today, and indeed in the world. Obesity and its concomitant cousins, which diabetes and heart disease are rampant. Used to be said that the way you always knew an American was to walk behind them because they were rather large compared to everybody else, but it turns out the rest of the world is catching up rapidly. And even in China, they are experiencing today an epidemic of diabetes, as well as in other Southeast Asian countries. So the challenge is immense, not only for us individually, but also as a society, because if we don't solve that problem, whatever kind of health care program you have, whether it's Obamacare or no Obamacare or who cares, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can't keep putting people into the system and having them come out not changed in a way that keeps them away from the system to begin with. So that, again, underscores the importance of this MPX100. And I know we say longevity formula, but let me put that in perspective. Anything that makes you healthy can be considered a longevity formula. So that's not its exclusive province, that take this and you're going to be like, like the 100-year-old people in Okinawa. Well, maybe you will. Maybe you won't. It's going to take more than MPX 100, I can guarantee you, but it's going to address some of the major considerations that you have to have under control in order to have anything you do in the health field work right. It addresses, again, the regulating blood sugar. There's one of the most promising anti-aging drugs that's being touted for anti-aging is something called metformin or glucophage. Glucophage actually means glucose helper. That's where it got its moniker from the French scientists who did a lot of work with it. And what it does is simply mimics, or I should say the MPX mimics what metformin does, but in a way that has no drug side effects. Because metformin as a drug, there are no drugs that I know of that don't have some kind of a side effect that goes with it. MPX utilizes two historically renowned herbs, or foods, I should say, that have been used for centuries to help many different kinds of situations in the body. One's called lotus, rock lotus, and the other is the bitter melon. Bitter melon is interesting because I just saw an article about the fellow who named the blue zones the blue zones. Blue zones are areas of the world where they have a high percentage of the people who live well into their 90s or sometimes 100 years old in vibrant health. Very active, physically active, mentally active, and they've identified at least 5 areas of the world where these situations exist. One's in Greece, or Sardinia, I should say. One's also in Greece, Icaria. There's an area in Peru. There's another area that a lot of our members are familiar with, and that's Loma Linda in Southern California has also been identified as a blue zone. Okinawa being the other one. And they listed the different foods that are kind of common to people in these areas, even though there's some very different cultures. People in Sardinia have a very different lifestyle than the people in Okinawa, obviously. You know, you can't say there's one diet that's common to all of them. But they do have several different kinds of foods and herbs that seem to be part of this whole process. Among them, for example, rosemary, which has been touted for its memory, cognitive enhancing properties, and its antioxidant abilities for a long time. Some of your natural products, natural food products, will have extract of rosemary as a preservative, a natural preservative, because of its antioxidant properties. They list beans, garbanzo beans, lentils are in that whole category. Avocados are in there, goat milk is in there. And one, again, that should be very common to us or be appreciative to us, among those 12 foods, bitter melon. Bitter melon was listed as one of the foods that people in the blue zones employ as part of their longevity and their good health. And again, because it helps to regulate blood sugar in a way, two ways. One, the liver, it helps the liver in producing glucose. It helps regulate the production of glucose, and it improves what's called insulin sensitivity. When you go through a diabetic type condition, what happens is the information or the docking sites on the cell that should be taking in sugar, the insulin transports the sugar into the cell to be used for energy. But something happens and it becomes resistant. There's too much sugar in the system, for example, too many carbohydrates that break down rapidly into sugar. And after a while, because it keeps producing it and it's not getting the results getting in, it builds up a resistance. And when this happens, then you start to have the repercussions that deal with things like type 2 diabetes and, interestingly, which I'll relate, heart disease. Heart disease and diabetes are intimately linked. If you've got blood sugar problems, you've got cardiovascular problems, or you will have cardiovascular problems. And the key to it is improving the health of the liver. One of the main problems we've got today that's associated with type 2 diabetes is a problem called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And this is a problem, again, where the liver just doesn't function properly. It doesn't produce the enzymes and the different things and the filters that it needs to keep you healthy. It can lead to sclerosis, and it can lead to cardiovascular complications. It's all diet related. All diet related. Remember I said non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's not someone who's drinking excessively and having a problem with the liver. This is a problem with the liver because you're just eating the wrong kinds of foods. You're eating too many processed foods, too many sugars, too many starches that break down too quickly into sugar. MPX100 also will help with fatty liver disease. We had a confirmation, and again, we don't have big studies on MPX100 because we don't have the money to do those big kind of studies like with metformin, but Dr. Dallas Clouatre, he and his brother actually developed not only the formula but sourced the different plants that go into MPX100, gave me a testimony of a friend of his who had fatty liver disease, took the MPX, went back to the doctor, and he didn't have fatty liver disease anymore. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen to you, but it's certainly one of the ways to help keep that from happening because, again, it will detox your liver. The liver, again, if the liver is bad, you're bad, period. There's no way you can have a healthy body with an unhealthy liver. So the MPX100 with the rock lotus and the bitter melon will help to bring about part of these conditions. It's kind of interesting, the bitter melon that we use, incidentally, is a wild-sourced bitter melon. It's a small one. Anyone who's ever been to an Asian store will see bitter melon. It's a very, very popular component. They use it a lot in soups, and it is bitter. So it's put into soups and kind of blended with other foods, like you could put a meat stock with it or other kinds of vegetables so that it's not so intense. But what we do here in the West, and the reason why we really want the wild source, because all over the world, we don't want things that are really bitter. When you brew the bitterness out of bitter melon, you're losing some of the therapeutic properties. It was kind of interesting, the little side note, there's actually a group of people who can take the juice. Now I can't, again, confirm this with actual hospital admissions. They take the juice of the bitter melon and use that as a substitute for bovine-derived insulin because it has some of the same properties in the body. It's a very, very interesting subject, but you don't want it, again, you don't want to take the bitterness out of it. It looks like a cucumber that's really been through some rough times. It's all crunkly and this and that, you know, so it's really, really not too good. And just to kind of finish that thought on the plant breeding, everything we're eating today is being made sweeter. They don't want onions that are really pungent. You want Walla Wallas. You want to be sweet. You want an apple. You want a sweeter apple. You want sweeter carrots. The old-time carrots were purple, and they weren't that sweet. But now we want to keep breeding them sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, which means that your pancreas, your liver, all of those things that are involved with glucose are going to be constantly under siege, assuming you'll even eat any vegetables. And if you're not, then you're still screwed up because now you're eating all the breads and all the processed foods and everything else. It's going to be a difficult time. So again, the whole point is eat as healthy things as you can, because when you have the proper level of insulin in your body and the proper use of glucose, now the body can also use other nutrients more effectively. You're going to be getting more of what you're eating when all of those things are balanced. When the body isn't trying to handle the imbalances caused by excess of sugar and glucose and all those other kinds of concerns. You will also notice, you should notice, an improvement in your body composition. I had a friend at the gym, as a fellow that works at one of the eye clinics, and we were talking. I went actually in for an eye exam, and we started talking about nutrients and sugars and those kind of things. And so he started researching all the foods that he was eating. And he just started eliminating all the sugar. Any place he found sugar, he eliminated it. In 4 weeks, the man lost 22 pounds. Same exercise, same everything, except he cut the sugar out. He became a more efficient user of glucose with the natural glucose that he was getting from the other foods that were being broken down in a more logical way. With the MPX100, again, you're giving the body the opportunity now to not just try to store or have a problem transporting sugar into the cell. Now when that's properly working, the body can handle its energy requirements from glucose and go after stored fat for energy. That's the real key. If you put the blood sugar under control, then the body can start to make sense of the fat that's been stored that doesn't need to be used, or it wasn't being used before because you couldn't access it because your blood sugar wouldn't allow you to do that. And if you've ever known people, I mean, you either have two extremes. If you have people who have problems with blood sugar, they either have two extremes. Sometimes they just have too much weight, sometimes they don't have enough. Sometimes they can get very, very lean because, again, it's a malabsorption of nutrients, and they can't use the food properly to gain the advantage that they need in terms of their health. Which means, again, for hormone, and Herb Akers is going to be talking about our ENA, but you obviously need to produce your own hormones to have things work correctly. And if you don't have a proper insulin glucose symphony, so to speak, if those things aren't working right, again, just as with nutrient absorption, you can't produce hormones effectively. The body's under stress. The body doesn't have enough energy to produce everything it needs, having to handle all the adrenal issues that come with this stress, which again is also what Herb will talk about in terms of the ENA, in terms of balancing that. But to make that work better, eat the right kind of foods, use the MPX, and then you have a base by which all these things then can be more efficiently utilized in the body. That's the real key. Hormones are the key to the whole issue, but they work on a substrate of good food. That's the whole key. The good food is what makes it all work. So, I mean, if you add up all those different kinds of things, yeah, Now you have a good longevity formula. You have a longevity health formula. And again, as I said, balance your blood sugar, balance the insulin, and help your heart. If your liver is functioning properly, your heart will function properly. That's the key. You just can't have one without the other. So that's a critical element. Now, so what's that mean in terms of what we should be doing daily to make all this work right? I just read an interesting article, and again, this is information. This is the information phase of what we're doing. Here's the hard part now. You have transformation, you have information. Transformation is 80% of the game. Information is 20%. So you've got the 20% information. Now you have to figure out, how do I fit it into my life? Now with MPX, that's not too hard. All you have to do is put it in your mouth and swallow it. That shouldn't be a big obstacle for most people. The other part again is, what kind of diet changes am I going to make? When it comes to, and what kind of exercise? This again, I hate to talk to you when your eyes start crossing when we talk about exercise, but this is an important area because when it comes to fatty liver disease, the most effective strategy to help that is exercise. And especially weighted resistance exercise. A paper showed that exercise was more important than diet in terms of helping a fatty liver disease. And for people who are out of shape to begin with, weight training is more important than aerobics because they don't have the cardiovascular capacity to do enough movement. Whereas you can start to train the muscles, and that will also help you burn your glucose because now that's a great energy source. So if you start with that and build up and then do nice slow walking along with that, now you start to transform the body so that whatever else you take in is going to work better. That's the real key. And again, for all of us, everyone in this room is older than 20, which means we're all dealing, Herb says, not me, yeah, right, which means that we're all interested in maintaining the structural integrity of our bodies. That means you want to keep the muscle on your bodies. If you don't have something that handles blood sugar properly, adding muscle, using muscle becomes very, very difficult. I take MPX before I work out. I take it about an hour, hour and a half before I work out every day, so that I've got more fatty acids, free fatty acids flowing through my body now to be used for energy, as well as taking it before, I take it twice a day, before we'll work out and before my dinner at night. And that will help with that particular aspect of working our body so that we keep the muscle on the body, because if you want a true longevity formula, the major longevity, youthful formula, it's muscle. No muscle, no youth, no muscle, no activity, no muscle, no life. How's that? I don't think I can put it any clearer in that whole thing. So the whole way to do that again is you have to do something that stresses the muscle beyond what you normally do. And the easiest way to do that is to push or pull or lift or do something that makes your body work at a rate that sends a signal to the brain that you are under stress, you're under siege, and the body needs to protect itself, and the way it does it is by adding more muscle. They just had a big survey come out, and the one thing we don't know is how much exercise do we really need? And that's really a hard equation to find out. So they did a big test, a big test, and they had people who never exercised, people who exercised moderately, people who exercised more vigorously. They estimate you need at least 120 minutes a week of exercise to kind of be at the right level. And they found that people who didn't exercise had a 31% greater chance of dying. People who exercised kind of a little bit more it was like 19% or something like that. People who exercised in the right range, they had a much less chance of dying prematurely. But what was interesting, the people who exercised more, they didn't have a problem. We were told before, oh, if you exercise too much, that's bad. Well, they didn't necessarily improve that much, but they weren't any worse. And in fact, those who had some kind of vigorous activity during the week did the best of all. So my plea to you, my friends, learn some basic structural realities of food, understand the whole relationship of your blood sugar to not only, that particular part of your body, but your heart, your brain, because again, I should also add, besides your heart in terms of blood sugar, if you don't have your blood sugar correctly, I will guarantee you that there can be problems down the road with your cognition, with your ability to think properly, and with the stress that comes and the free radical damage that takes place in the brain. And I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't turn out to be a causative factor for things like Alzheimer's or maybe Parkinson's or other types of neurological situations in the body. So put that whole thing together. And again, just coming things out, mild cognitive issues, MPI, were resolved better with weight training than with any other kind of intervention for older people, 70 plus. Want to think better, weight training helped them think better. How much you take? We say what, 1, twice a day? I take 3 twice a day, and there's no, again, this is not like a drug where there's going to be a side effect or some real major problem because you take a lot. To me, this is what feels good. This is where I find out. I do something called intermittent fasting, which allows my body to get rid of toxins by increasing the time where I don't eat. I do a 16-8 program where for 8 hours a day I eat, 16 hours I don't, but that also includes the time I sleep. And that helps to initiate something called apoptosis and/or the cleansing of damaged proteins, DNA fragments, other types of things that the body doesn't need. It allows my body to go and recycle them, to get rid of them. That's an important part. The reason I'm saying this is because I find that when I get my blood sugar in balance, I can go hours without eating, and I don't notice anything. I can remember before when I was younger, I would notice periods of low blood sugar, and when it's there. You know how you feel. You're not sharp. You're a little edgy. I can remember breaking up with a very nice lady once over issues at a wedding, eating too much wedding cake, I guess. I don't know what it was. But nonetheless, at this point, if I don't eat, I stop eating 8 o'clock at night, I work out, intense weight training about 11 o'clock, I get home 12:30, 1, and I'm eating at 1:30. That's a long time in between any eating, and no blood sugar issues. No downs or ups or this or that's or whatever it happens to be, because my body has been allowed to restore itself in terms of utilizing my fat for energy. And that's, again, part of what we're talking about in terms of burning fat. If you don't worry about your sugar, the body's going to use its fat. And believe me, as skinny as you may be, you have a lot more fat in your body than you have sugar. So you can go for a long, long time. And throughout human history, we've had 2 constants. One is not knowing when you were going to eat, and the second one is having to work very hard to get whatever you did have. That's the way we are programmed. That's actually the whole basis of intermittent fasting as well. So put all those different things together, help your body out. Enterprime, MPX, lean factors, ENA to help with all the stress that everybody engenders during the day. Again, not eating right is a stress. Exercise is a stress. It's a good stress, but it's still a stress, and you still want to get that balance back in whatever you do. So balance is the key. Balance is the key, and that's the key to longevity and health and everything else that we're looking for. So I thank you all very much. Appreciate the time.